A dog keeps hugging a crying kitten. And when the vet finds out why, he bursts into tears. At first, it looks like just a loyal old German shepherd protecting a tiny stray. But there's something strange about the way he won't let anyone near her. Something deeper, something wrong. The vet takes a closer look, and what he discovers changes everything. Hidden beneath fur and dirt is a clue that ties this kitten to a missing child, a powerful family, and a secret that was never meant to be uncovered. As the dog refuses to let go, a chilling mystery begins to unfold, one that could expose the darkest truth this quiet town has ever buried. Why is this dog risking everything to protect a kitten? And what did the vet see that made a grown man break down in tears? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. A fierce wind howled through the trees of Rustwood, Tennessee, rattling the worn shutters of Lenora Bell's farmhouse. Rain pelted against the windows like tiny stones, creating an endless drumbeat in the darkness. Lenora, wrapped in her favorite wool cardigan, stood at her kitchen window, watching Bramble, a retired German shepherd, lying contentedly on the covered porch. The old dog's ears suddenly perked up, his head lifted, alert and focused on something in the stormy night that Lenora couldn't see. Before she could reach the screen door, Bramble was on his feet, his aging body moving with surprising speed as he disappeared into the darkness. "Bramble!" Lenora called out, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "Come back, boy!" Minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. Lenora's fingers worried at her silver braid as she peered into the gloom. Finally, she spotted movement. Bramble's familiar shape emerging from the shadows. But he wasn't alone. Gripped gently in his mouth was a tiny, soaked bundle of grey fur. Lenora rushed onto the porch, her orthopedic shoes squeaking against the wet boards. "Oh my word," she breathed, kneeling despite her protesting knees. Bramble carefully set down his precious cargo, a kitten so small it could fit in Lenora's palm. The creature was shivering violently, its blue eyes wide with fear, its ears torn and bleeding slightly. What caught Lenora's attention most was Bramble's behavior. The former K9 officer positioned himself protectively over the kitten, his usual dignified demeanor replaced by an almost frantic concern. "Where did you find this little one?" Lenora murmured, reaching for the kitten. Bramble whined, nudging her hand toward the direction of old Miller's collapsed trailer at the edge of her property. The kitten let out a pitiful cry that seemed to distress Bramble even more. Lenora had never seen her steady companion so agitated. All right," she soothed, gathering the kitten in a clean dish towel. "We're going to see Dr. Harrow right now." Despite the late hour, Lenora knew the town veterinarian would still be at his clinic. Elliot Harrow kept irregular hours, more comfortable with his animal patients than with people since losing his wife 3 years ago. She loaded Bramble and the kitten into her weathered pickup truck, the German shepherd refusing to leave the kitten's side. The small veterinary clinic sat dark, except for a single light in the back office. Lenora knocked firmly on the door, sheltering the kitten from the continuing rain. After a moment, Doctor. Harrow's tired face appeared. His graying beard was unkempt, and his flannel shirt looked like he'd slept in it. "Lenora?" He squinted against the porch light. "What brings you out in this weather?" "Bramble found this little one," she explained, holding out the bundled kitten. "Something's not right, Elliot. I've never seen him act this way about a stray before." Dr. Harrow's initial expression suggested he wanted to dismiss this as a simple case of a concerned citizen overreacting to a stray kitten. But years of experience had taught him to trust Lenora's instincts, and more importantly, to trust Bramble's. The retired K9 officer's training had never failed them before. Inside the examination room, Dr. Harrow gently unwrapped the trembling kitten. His practiced hands moved methodically, checking for injuries. The kitten's torn ears were minor concerns, but as he examined its tiny paws, he froze. "What is it?" Lenora asked, noting the sudden tension in his shoulders. Dr. Harrow reached for a swab, and carefully collected a sample from beneath the kitten's claws. His movements became more precise, more focused. After a quick test, he looked up at Lenora with troubled eyes. "This is human blood," he said quietly. "Fresh, too. And these marks here?" He pointed to barely visible bruising under the kitten's fur. "These aren't from natural causes." Bramble whined from his position by the examination table, his brown eyes fixed on the kitten. The little creature reached out a paw towards the dog, as if seeking comfort from a trusted friend. "Someone hurt this kitten?" Lenora's voice carried a mix of horror and anger. "Yes," Dr. Harrow confirmed, his tired eyes now sharp with concern. "And given the amount of blood under its claws, I'd say this little one fought back against something, or someone. The question is, what exactly happened out there tonight?" The storm continued its assault outside the clinic windows, but inside, a different kind of tension filled the air. Dr. Harrow's discovery had transformed a simple rescue into something far more troubling. Bramble stood guard over the kitten, his posture rigid with protective intent, while Lenora and Dr. Harrow exchanged worried glances, both knowing that this stormy night had just become the beginning of something much darker than they'd initially imagined. The lab results arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, landing on Elliot's desk with the same mundane appearance as any other medical report. He sipped his coffee, expecting routine confirmation of what they already knew: human blood, nothing more. But as his eyes scanned the document, the coffee cup slipped from his fingers, splattering across the linoleum floor. The blood matched Perry Foy, an 8-year-old boy who had vanished 3 weeks ago. Elliot's hands trembled as he read the report again. Perry's disappearance had shaken the small town of Rustwood, but like many such cases, the initial panic had gradually faded into resigned sadness. Missing person posters, now weather-worn and curling at the edges, still clung to telephone poles and store windows throughout town. He grabbed his truck keys, the report crumpling in his tight grip. The drive to the collapsed trailer took only 10 minutes, but each second felt like an eternity. The morning sun cast long shadows across the overgrown lot, making the trailer's broken shape look even more ominous than it had in the rain. Bramble, who had refused to leave Lenora's side since finding the kitten, stood at attention in her front yard, watching Elliot's approach. The dog's posture was rigid, his ears forward, tracking every movement around the property. "He's been like this for days," Lenora called from her porch, worry lines creasing her forehead. "Won't relax, barely sleeps. The kitten's the same way, jumps at every sound." Elliot nodded grimly and made his way toward the trailer. Its metal walls had partially caved in years ago, creating a twisted maze of rusted panels and exposed insulation. He moved carefully, testing each step on the unstable ground. Near where Bramble had found the kitten, a section of wall had sunken into the earth, creating a small cavity. Elliot knelt, pulling out his flashlight. The beam revealed something that made his stomach turn. Scratch marks on the metal, both low and high. A small water bottle lay crushed in one corner. Candy wrappers, a child's sock caked with mud. "Dear God," he whispered, his professional detachment crumbling. Back at his clinic, Elliot's hands shook as he dialed the sheriff's office. He had known Sheriff Mills for years, treated his hunting dogs countless times, but as he described his findings, he could hear the skepticism growing in the other man's voice. "Now, Elliot," Mills said slowly, "you're talking about Junior Foy's property here. You understand what you're suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Elliot replied, frustration building. "I'm telling you I found evidence that Perry Foy was held captive in that trailer. I have blood evidence, physical signs." "Blood evidence from a cat scratch?" Mills interrupted. "And some trash in an old trailer. Junior Foy is a respected member of this community. His brother's boy goes missing, and now you're trying to pin it on him?" "I'm not trying to pin anything on anyone," Elliot insisted. "I'm asking you to investigate." "Investigation's closed, Elliot. Perry's case is with the state police now, and I'd be careful about throwing around accusations. Junior's got friends in high places, and he doesn't take kindly to people smearing his name." The line went dead. Elliot stared at the phone, the threat in Mills's words hanging heavy in the air. At Lenora's house, the kitten, which she had started calling Hope, huddled close to Bramble on the porch. The German Shepherd's protective instincts seemed to have gone into overdrive, treating the tiny creature like a vulnerable charge that needed constant guarding. "They won't help, will they?" Lenora asked as Elliot approached. She didn't need to hear his answer. His expression said everything. "Junior Foy has too much influence," Elliot confirmed, sinking into a porch chair. "His family's owned half this county since before the Civil War. Nobody wants to believe he could." He couldn't finish the sentence. The kitten mewed softly, pressing closer to Bramble. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the trailer in the distance, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "This isn't over," Lenora said firmly, her usual gentle demeanor hardening with resolve. "That boy is out there somewhere. If the police won't help, we'll find another way." Elliot looked at her, then at Bramble and the kitten. The retired canine officer's training, the kitten's mysterious appearance, the blood evidence. It all pointed to something terrible happening right under their noses. And now, with the authorities unwilling to act, they were the only ones left who seemed to care about finding the truth. "You're right," he said quietly. "This isn't over. But whatever we do next, we need to be careful. Junior Foy didn't get where he is by being careless with his secrets." Bramble's growl deepened, as if understanding the gravity of their situation. The kitten, still bearing the marks of its own encounter with violence, trembled slightly but stayed close to its protector. In that moment, on Lenora's worn porch, an unlikely alliance formed. A retired vet, a widow, an ex-police dog, and a tiny kitten, all united by the desperate need to uncover the truth about Perry Foy's disappearance. Bramble's strange behavior intensified over the next few days. The aging German Shepherd, usually so dignified and calm, transformed into a bundle of nervous energy. His nails clicked against Lenora's wooden floors as he paced, whining at the windows and doors until someone let him out. "He hasn't been like this since his service days," Lenora told Elliot, watching Bramble dig frantically at the base of an old storage shed. The dog's powerful paws threw dirt in wide arcs, his concentration unwavering. "It's like he's searching for something specific." Elliot knelt beside the growing hole, shining his flashlight into the darkness. "Or someone," he murmured. Though they found nothing beneath the shed, Bramble's persistence was telling. The retired K-9 officer hadn't lost his training or his instincts. They followed Bramble across Lenora's 5 acres as he led them to spot after spot. The dog would stop at seemingly random places, a stretch of fence line, an empty field, the back of an abandoned barn, barking with urgent purpose. At each location, they discovered small signs that chilled them to the bone. Behind the fence, partially buried, a child's sneaker, size matching the one from the trailer. In the field, scraps of a blue blanket, worn but recently discarded. Near the barn, fresh tire tracks and a candy wrapper dated just days ago. "They're moving him," Elliot said, carefully photographing each piece of evidence, keeping him just ahead of anyone who might be looking. The kitten, whom Lenora had started calling Hope, watched their investigations from the safety of the porch. The tiny grey creature seemed to share Bramble's anxiety, mewing plaintively whenever the dog grew especially agitated. It was during one such afternoon of searching that Junior Foy's black pickup truck rolled into the clinic's parking lot. Elliot saw it through his office window and felt his chest tighten. The rancher's boots clicked ominously on the linoleum as he approached the front desk. "Doc Harrow," Junior called out, his voice carrying that famous charm that had won him so many local elections. "Got a minute to chat?" Elliot stepped into the waiting room, maintaining a professional distance. "Mr. Foy, what can I do for you?" Junior's smile didn't reach his eyes. He was dressed in his usual crisp Western shirt and polished boots, every inch the respected businessman. "Heard you've been asking questions about my property. That old Miller trailer?" "Just following up on some concerns," Elliot replied carefully. "As a medical professional, let me stop you right there." Junior's charm vanished like morning mist. This town's seen enough tragedy with my nephew's disappearance. No need to go stirring up ghosts, making accusations that could damage reputations. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Folks around here respect you, Doc. Would hate to see that change over some misunderstanding." The threat hung in the air between them, clear as breaking glass. Elliot met Junior's gaze steadily, thinking of the evidence they'd found, of the blood on Hope's claws, of Bramble's desperate searching. "I appreciate your concern," Elliot said evenly. "But as a doctor, I have certain obligations." Junior's laugh was cold. "Obligations? To who? Some stray cat? A retired police dog gone senile?" He adjusted his hat, the gesture somehow menacing. "Take my friendly advice, Doc. Let sleeping dogs lie." After Junior left, Elliot sat in his office for a long time, hand shaking slightly as he looked through his phone contacts. Finally, he found the number he needed, one he'd gotten from an old newspaper article about the original Perry Foy investigation. Judith Crane answered on the third ring. "Who is this?" "Dr. Elliot Harrow from Rustwood. I need to talk to you about Perry Foy." A long silence followed. When Judith spoke again, her voice was sharp with suspicion. "The missing kid? That case is closed." "No," Elliot said firmly. "It's not. I have evidence, new evidence, and I think I know why you were really removed from the investigation." Another pause. Then, "Meet me at Carson's Diner off Highway 47. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Come alone." The line went dead. That evening, as Elliot shared the day's events with Lenora, Bramble suddenly rushed to the window, barking furiously. They hurried to look, but saw only darkness beyond the glass. The dog's hackles were raised, his entire body rigid with alert focus. "He senses something," Lenora whispered, clutching Hope protectively to her chest. The kitten's blue eyes were wide, fixed on the same point as Bramble's intense gaze. Elliot stared into the night, Junior's threats echoing in his mind. Somewhere out there, a frightened boy was being moved from hiding place to hiding place. Somewhere in the darkness, terrible secrets were being kept. But now they had proof. They had witnesses, even if one was a retired K9 and the other a tiny kitten. And tomorrow, they would have help from someone who had faced the Foy family's power before and lived to tell about it. The morning sun cast long shadows across Carson's Diner as Elliot pulled into the gravel parking lot. Through the fingerprinted windows, he could see a solitary figure in a corner booth, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Judith Crane looked exactly like her newspaper photos from 5 years ago. Sharp features, cropped grey hair, and eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail. "You're on time," she said as Elliot slid into the booth. "That's something, at least." Before Elliot could respond, a waitress appeared with fresh coffee. They waited until she left, before speaking again. "Tell me everything," Judith said, "from the beginning." Elliot laid out the story, the kitten, the blood evidence, Bramble's behavior, and the items they'd found. With each detail, Judith's expression grew more intense, her knuckles whitening around her mug. "I knew it," she whispered fiercely. "I knew that bastard had something to do with Perry's disappearance. Junior Foy's been untouchable in this town for too long." They spent the next hour reviewing photos on Elliot's phone. When he showed her the tire tracks near the barn, Judith's hand trembled slightly. 5 years ago, I found similar tracks behind Junior's hunting cabin, but before I could get a warrant, the evidence disappeared. Then came the complaints about harassment, the internal investigation, and suddenly I'm forced into early retirement. That afternoon, they met Lenora and Bramble at the edge of Junior's property. The German shepherd's excitement was immediate and infectious. He led them through overgrown paths, past rusted equipment, until they reached a pile of discarded feed bags. "Wait!" Judith called out as Bramble began nosing through the bags. She pulled on latex gloves and carefully shifted the mouldering burlap. Something glinted in the sunlight. "My God!" she breathed, lifting a small silver locket. Inside was a school photo of Perry Foy, smiling gap-toothed at the camera. This is the one his mother gave him. He was wearing it the day he disappeared. Elliot photographed everything while Judith bagged the evidence. With the locket, the blood results, and their other findings, they had enough to approach the authorities. This time, they went straight to Officer Marcus Chen, a rookie who hadn't been around during the original investigation. "I can't ignore this," Chen said, reviewing their evidence file. "But going after Junior Foy, I'll need everything absolutely perfect. Give me 24 hours to process the warrant request." They left the station feeling cautiously optimistic, but their hope was short-lived. That evening, as Elliot finished his clinic rounds, he heard Lenora's scream from the backyard. He rushed outside to find Bramble convulsing on the ground, foam around his muzzle. "Someone poisoned him!" Lenora sobbed as Elliot dropped to his knees beside the dog. "There was meat in the yard. I didn't see him eat it in time." Elliot's medical training took over. He induced vomiting, administered activated charcoal, and started IV fluids. For 3 hours, he fought to keep Bramble alive, while Lenora paced and Hope watched from her perch on the windowsill, mewing softly. "Stay with us, old friend," Elliot murmured, monitoring Bramble's heartbeat. "We need you. Perry needs you." Finally, around midnight, Bramble's condition stabilized. Exhausted but relieved, Elliot stepped outside for fresh air and saw the orange glow in the distance. "No," he whispered, already knowing what he would find. The shed where they'd discovered the locket was engulfed in flames. Fire trucks arrived too late to save anything. As Elliot watched from across the field, he saw Junior Foy speaking with the fire chief, gesturing casually as if discussing the weather rather than the destruction of evidence. When Judith arrived at the scene, her face was carved from stone. "This is how it started last time," she said. "First the threats, then the accidents. They're sending us a message." "Then they're worried," Elliot replied, thinking of Bramble fighting for his life back at the clinic. "They wouldn't be escalating if we weren't getting close." Dawn found them gathered in Elliot's office, Judith reviewing her old case files, Lenora tending to a recovering Bramble, and Hope curled protectively against the dog's side. The poison and fire had confirmed their worst fears, but also strengthened their resolve. "We're not backing down," Judith declared, spreading photos across Elliot's desk. "Not this time. Somewhere in this town, there's a boy who's been waiting 5 years for someone to find him." Elliot looked at Bramble, still weak but alert, watching them with knowing eyes. The dog had nearly died trying to expose the truth. They owed it to him, and to Perry, to see this through. In the quiet of the clinic, Elliot gently examined Hope, while Bramble rested nearby. The German shepherd's breathing had steadied, but Elliot wasn't taking any chances after the poisoning. Every few minutes, he found himself checking Bramble's vital signs, grateful for each steady heartbeat. Under the bright examination light, Hope's scarred ears told a darker story than he'd first realized. The kitten squirmed as he parted the fur, revealing old injuries that had healed poorly. Something about the pattern nagged at his memory. "These marks," he murmured, reaching for his old case files. "I've seen something like this before." Judith looked up from her stack of police reports. "What is it?" 5 years ago, before Perry disappeared, I treated several animals from the Sunshine Days daycare. Junior's wife ran it before she passed." Elliot pulled out a weathered folder. "The injuries were similar. Defensive wounds, like something small trying to protect itself. Or someone else." Hope mewed softly, pressing against his hand. The kitten's blue eyes held a wisdom beyond its young age, as if carrying memories too heavy for such a tiny creature. "The daycare closed after Mrs. Foy died," Judith said, spreading out more papers. "But there were complaints before that. Children coming home with unexplained bruises, behavioral changes." She pointed to a series of dates. Every report was withdrawn within days. Parents suddenly changed their stories or moved away. Elliot scratched behind Hope's ears, earning a gentle purr. The kitten's been through trauma, but these aren't just survival injuries. They're protective marks, like it was trying to shield something, someone. Or someone was protecting it. Judith added, watching Bramble lift his head at the kitten's purr. Think about it. Perry disappears, and 5 years later, this kitten shows up with his blood under its claws, but not from an attack. From living with him. Elliot finished, the realization hitting him hard. The kitten wasn't just near Perry, it was his companion, maybe his only friend in captivity. Hope jumped down from the examination table and padded over to Bramble, curling up against the dog's side. The German shepherd, still weak from the poison, shifted slightly to accommodate his small friend. That's why Bramble was so determined, Lenora said softly from the doorway, where she'd been listening. He wasn't just saving a kitten, he was following Perry's scent, trying to help them both. Elliot watched the unlikely pair, the retired police dog and the tiny stray, and felt his throat tighten. How many nights had Perry spent alone, with only this small, brave kitten for comfort? How had Hope found her way to him, and what had they witnessed together? Junior's wife, Judith said suddenly, pulling out an old newspaper clipping. Her death was ruled an accident, but I always wondered. She was found at the bottom of their stairs the same week I started investigating the daycare complaints. And Perry started visiting his uncle's property more often after that. Elliot remembered. The poor kid probably had no idea he was walking into a trap. Hope stretched and yawned, revealing tiny teeth that had once drawn blood, not in aggression, but in desperate protection of a frightened child. Bramble watched the kitten with obvious affection, his protective instincts still strong despite his weakened state. We've been looking at this wrong, Judith said, gathering her papers with renewed purpose. We thought finding the kitten was the beginning, but it's more than that. Hope is our witness. She's been with Perry this whole time, seeing everything, trying to help in the only way she could. Elliot nodded, understanding dawning. And Bramble sensed it. That's why he wouldn't give up, why he kept searching even after finding Hope. He knew she wasn't just another stray, she was a link to Perry. They watched as Hope settled into sleep, safely tucked against Bramble's side. 2 protectors, one small and one large, both driven by the same instinct to save those who couldn't save themselves. Tomorrow, Judith said firmly, we go back through every withdrawn complaint, every accident report around the daycare. Junior's been hiding more than just Perry, and this kitten might be the key to exposing it all. Elliot checked Bramble's IV one more time, his hand lingering on the dog's sturdy shoulder. You knew, didn't you, old friend? You understood what Hope was trying to tell us. Bramble's tail thumped weakly against the blanket, his eyes never leaving the sleeping kitten. In the quiet of the clinic, surrounded by evidence of years of hidden crimes, a retired police dog and a brave little stray had formed an unlikely alliance, one that might finally bring Perry home. Despite the veterinarian's protests, Bramble struggled to his feet, his legs shaking, but his determination unwavering. The German shepherd's eyes were bright with urgency, even as his body showed the lingering effects of the poison. He shouldn't be moving yet. Dr. Elliot Harrow muttered, watching as the dog pulled against his leash. Lenora held tight, trying to keep Bramble from overexerting himself. Look at him, Elliot, Judith Crane said, her weathered face creased with concern. He's trying to tell us something again. Bramble whined, pulling toward the tree line where the dense Tennessee forest began. His nose worked the air, and despite his weakness, his training showed through in his focused posture. We follow him, Judith decided, checking her flashlight. He hasn't been wrong yet. They walked slowly, accommodating Bramble's unsteady gait. The dog led them through tangles of kudzu and past ancient oaks, following a path only he could sense. After 20 minutes of careful progress, a structure emerged from the shadows, A hunting cabin, its wooden walls grey with age. "I know this place," Judith whispered. "It belonged to Old Man Turner before he passed. Junior bought the land last spring." Elliot's heart pounded as they approached. The cabin's door hung slightly ajar, creaking in the evening breeze. Bramble's tail began to wag, and he pulled forward with renewed strength. Inside, their flashlights revealed signs of recent occupation. A child's sleeping bag lay crumpled in one corner, its blue fabric dirty but clearly used. On a small table, they found half-eaten packages of crackers and an empty juice box. "Perry," Lenora breathed, picking up a small sock from the floor. Judith moved her light across the walls, stopping when it illuminated a crude drawing done in crayon, a child's artwork showing a small grey figure beside a larger one. Hope and Perry, drawn by lonely hands in hidden moments. "This is recent," Elliot said, touching the wall. "The crayon marks are fresh, no dust on them." Bramble sniffed every corner, his tail wagging faster despite his weakness. He knew Perry had been here, maybe just hours ago. "We need backup," Judith said, already dialing her phone. "Real backup this time, not just the local boys." While she made calls, Elliot and Lenora documented everything. They photographed the drawing, the sleeping bag, every piece of evidence that proved Perry had been alive and here. A truck's engine rumbled in the distance. They froze, but it passed by on some distant road. Still, the sound sparked a memory for Judith. "Wait," she said, hanging up her phone. "Miller's farm is just over that ridge. He's got those old grain silos." "The ones that haven't been used in years?" Elliot asked. "Perfect hiding place." Judith nodded. "And I know Miller's been having trouble with trespassers lately." They found Miller at his kitchen table, coffee cup in hand. His weather-worn face turned serious as they explained the situation. "Come to think of it," he said, "been hearing noises past few nights. Thought it was just kids messing around, but..." He pointed through his window toward the silos. "Saw someone moving around there this morning. Figured it was Junior's boys checking the property line again." Police cruisers arrived within the hour, their lights cutting through the gathering dusk. This time, faced with evidence they couldn't ignore and pressure from state authorities Judith had contacted, they had to act. Officers approached the silos cautiously, their flashlight beams sweeping the corrugated metal sides. Bramble, though still unsteady, stood at attention beside Lenora, watching intently. The explosion came without warning. A deafening boom shattered the evening calm. Flames erupted from the base of the nearest silo, sending everyone scrambling for cover. The blast wave knocked Elliot off his feet, and he watched in horror as fire engulfed the structure. "No!" Judith screamed, starting forward, but officers held her back. The flames roared higher, casting hellish light across the farmland. Through the chaos, they heard an engine rev, a truck peeling out behind the far silo. "It's Junior!" Miller shouted, pointing to the fleeing vehicle. "That's his truck." Two patrol cars immediately gave chase, sirens wailing into the darkness. The remaining officers and firefighters, just arriving on scene, fought to contain the blaze. Bramble barked suddenly, straining against his leash. His ears were forward, his posture alert despite his weakness. He wasn't looking at the burning silo, but at the one beside it. "Listen!" Lenora called out, hushing those nearby. In the momentary quiet between the fire's roars, they heard it, a faint tapping from inside the second silo. The sound of someone alive, someone waiting to be found. Through the billowing smoke, Bramble's ears suddenly pricked forward. Despite his weakened state, the old police dog's training kicked in. Before anyone could react, he wrenched free from Elliot's grip and bolted straight toward the burning silo. "Bramble, no!" Elliot lunged forward, but Judith held him back. "You can't go in there!" She struggled to restrain him as flames licked higher into the night sky. The whole structure could collapse. The German shepherd disappeared into the inferno. Seconds stretched into an eternity as they watched the entrance, hearts pounding. Firefighters shouted orders, their hoses creating curtains of water that turned to steam against the intense heat. "Please," Elliot whispered, his voice breaking. "Please come back." Hope mewed anxiously from her perch on Judith's shoulder, her blue eyes fixed on the burning building. The tiny kitten's ears were forward, tracking something they couldn't hear through the roar of the flames. Minutes passed, terrible, endless minutes. Then, through the smoke and fire, a shape emerged. Bramble moved slowly, deliberately, dragging something in his mouth. As he cleared the entrance, they saw it. Not something, but someone. A small boy, limp but intact, held carefully by his shirt collar. "Perry!" Judith gasped. Elliot rushed forward, meeting Bramble halfway. The dog released his precious cargo into the veterinarian's arms. Perry was conscious but dazed, his face streaked with soot. His eyes were wide with fear and confusion. "I've got you," Elliot assured him, quickly carrying him toward the waiting emergency vehicles. "You're safe now." The boy's clothes were filthy and torn, his frame painfully thin. But he was breathing. He was alive. Hope leaped from Judith's shoulder, bounding after them. When she reached Perry, the kitten pressed against his leg, purring loudly enough to be heard over the chaos. Perry's hand automatically reached down to stroke her fur, the familiar gesture seeming to ground him in reality. "Get those EMTs over here now," Judith barked, her detective's authority cutting through the confusion. The emergency medical technicians swarmed in with their equipment. They wrapped Perry in a blanket and began checking his vital signs. An oxygen mask was placed over his face while they started an IV to combat his dehydration. "Mild smoke inhalation, severely dehydrated," one EMT reported. "But his vitals are stable. We need to get him to the hospital right away." Through it all, Bramble stood guard, his stance protective despite his exhaustion. The old canine's fur was singed and his breathing was labored, but his eyes never left Perry. A commotion at the edge of the property drew Judith's attention. Through the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, she spotted a familiar figure trying to slip away to a waiting truck. "Junior," she growled. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward him, drawing her old service weapon. "Stop right there!" Junior Foy froze for just a moment before making a break for his vehicle. But Judith had been waiting years for this moment. She tackled him with the force of long-suppressed fury, driving him to the ground. "Junior Foy," she announced, pulling his arms behind his back as other officers rushed to assist. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, child endangerment, and attempted murder." As they led Junior away in handcuffs, his carefully maintained facade finally cracked. The respected businessman disappeared, replaced by something darker, more desperate. "You don't understand!" he shouted. "That boy, he was going to tell. I couldn't let him tell." Judith watched with grim satisfaction as he was placed in a patrol car. "Oh, he'll tell now. Everything." Back by the ambulance, Perry refused to let go of Hope. The EMTs, understanding the comfort the tiny kitten provided, allowed her to ride along. Bramble tried to follow too, but his legs finally gave out from the strain of his heroic rescue. Elliot caught the old dog as he stumbled. "Easy, boy. You've done more than enough. Let's get you looked at too." Perry reached out from his stretcher, touching Bramble's head with a trembling hand. The first words anyone heard him speak came in a whisper through the oxygen mask. "Good dog." Tears welled in Elliot's eyes as he helped load Bramble into his truck. The German Shepherd had done what no one else could. He'd followed his instincts, trusted his training, and saved a life that everyone else had nearly given up on. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing into the night. Fire crews continued battling the blaze, though the worst danger had passed. And through it all, Bramble watched from the truck's window, his duty finally complete. In the sterile quiet of Rustwood General Hospital, Perry Foy lay curled on his side, one hand resting protectively on Hope's tiny grey form. The kitten purred steadily, her presence a constant comfort in the unfamiliar surroundings. Medical machines beeped softly, marking time in the dimly lit room. Down the hall, Dr. Elliot Harrow and former Detective Judith Crane sat with two state police investigators, their coffee growing cold as they pieced together the nightmare that had finally ended. "The blood evidence from the kitten was just the beginning," Elliot explained, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Every time Bramble led us somewhere, we found more pieces of the puzzle. Junior had been moving Perry from place to place, always staying one step ahead. Judith spread out photographs across the conference room table. Here's the collapsed trailer where Hope was found, the shed that was burned, the hunting cabin, and finally the barn. She pointed to each location in turn. Junior had a whole network of properties registered under different names. He'd move the boy whenever he felt someone getting too close. One of the state investigators, a woman named Martinez, took notes rapidly. And you believe this connects to allegations from the daycare center years ago? Yes. Judith's jaw tightened. Junior's wife ran that place for 15 years before she died. We had reports, children showing signs of abuse, but the complaints always disappeared. The families would suddenly drop charges, move away, or just go quiet. Money and threats. Her partner added grimly. Classic intimidation pattern. In the interview room at the police station, Junior Foy sat slumped in his chair, his polished appearance crumbling after hours of questioning. His lawyer had advised silence, but something in him had snapped when they showed him Perry's drawing from the cabin wall. I had to protect the family name, he muttered, staring at his hands. Sarah, my wife, she started it. The daycare was her cover. When she died, I had to keep the secrets, had to keep everyone quiet. He looked up, eyes wild. Perry saw something at the house. He was going to tell his mother. I couldn't let him. Back at the hospital, a child psychologist named Dr. Chen sat quietly beside Perry's bed. Hope remained curled against the boy's chest, her presence helping to keep him calm. Can you tell me about your friend there? Dr. Chen asked gently, nodding toward the kitten. Perry's fingers moved through Hope's fur. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She found me, in the dark place. He paused, gathering courage. Uncle Junior put me in the trailer. It was cold. She came through a hole in the floor. Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. She kept you company. She brought me mice sometimes. Perry continued. And birds. I was so hungry. His voice caught. She stayed with me when they moved me, even when Uncle Junior... He trailed off, burying his face in Hope's fur. You're very brave, Perry, Dr. Chen assured him. Both of you are. Later that evening, Elliot returned to check on his patients. He found Perry sitting up slightly, actually eating some soup, while Hope watched attentively from her perch on his pillow. Someone else wants to see you, Elliot said softly. If you're feeling up to it. Perry nodded, and Elliot opened the door wider. Bramble limped in, his own injuries bandaged, but his tail wagging gently. The old dog approached the bed carefully, laying his head on the edge of the mattress. He saved us, Perry said, reaching out to touch Bramble's ear. The trailer was falling. Hope ran out first. I couldn't move fast enough, but he came in and pulled me out before everything fell down. Elliot blinked back tears as Perry continued speaking. More words than he'd said since being rescued. I heard him barking other times too, the boy recalled. When Uncle Junior moved me to the shed and the cabin, I wanted to call out, but... He shuddered. Uncle Junior said he'd hurt Hope if I made any noise. Hope stretched and moved to sniff Bramble's nose, a tiny kitten greeting a battle-worn warrior. The German shepherd's tail wagged slightly faster. You're all safe now, Elliot assured them, watching the unlikely family that had formed through tragedy. Junior can't hurt any of you anymore. As night fell over Rustwood, Perry finally drifted to sleep, Hope curled in her usual spot against his chest. Bramble settled on the floor beside the bed, standing guard even in rest. Outside the room, Judith updated Perry's parents, who had barely left the hospital since their son's rescue. The state police are taking over the investigation, she told them quietly. They're reopening all the old cases too. Junior's already confessed to some of it. Other families are starting to come forward. Perry's mother wiped her eyes. All this time, how did we not know? Junior Foy fooled everyone. Judith said. Everyone except a brave little kitten and a retired police dog who refused to give up. Through the window, they could see Perry sleeping peacefully for the first time since his rescue, protected by the two animals who had risked everything to save him. Hope's purring and Bramble's steady breathing created a gentle lullaby, keeping the darkness at bay. The county courthouse buzzed with tension on a crisp autumn morning. Junior Foy sat at the defendant's table, his pressed suit and polished boots a stark contrast to the handcuffs at his wrists. The gallery was packed with townsfolk, reporters, and families who had stayed silent for far too long. District Attorney Sarah Matthews approached the stand where Perry sat, his foster mother close by for support. Hope, now officially registered as his emotional support animal, perched in his lap. "Perry," Matthews began gently, "can you tell us about this locket?" She held up the evidence bag containing the tarnished heart-shaped pendant. Perry's fingers stroked Hope's fur as he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "It was my mum's. She gave it to me the day Uncle Junior took me." "And where was it found?" "In the feed bag, at the shed." Perry swallowed hard. "Uncle Junior ripped it off when he moved me. Said I couldn't keep anything that might help people find me." From his position in the gallery, Elliot watched Junior's facade crack slightly. The man's shoulders tensed at his nephew's words, his lawyer scribbling furiously beside him. Judith Crane took the stand next, years of investigative work finally seeing the light. She laid out a devastating timeline, connecting Junior and his late wife Sarah to dozens of suspicious incidents at the daycare. Families would report abuse, Judith testified, spreading photographs across the evidence table. Children with unexplained injuries, behavioral changes, but the complaints vanished. Parents suddenly withdrew their kids, moved away, or changed their stories. And what changed this pattern? Matthews asked. "A kitten," Judith said simply, gesturing to Hope, "and a retired police dog who knew something was wrong. They led us to Perry when everyone else had stopped looking." During the afternoon break, Elliot found himself in the witness preparation room with Perry and his foster parents. The boy seemed exhausted, but there was a new strength in his eyes. "You're doing great," Elliot assured him, checking Hope's water bowl. "Just a little more to go." Perry nodded, watching Bramble doze in the corner. The German Shepherd had recovered well from the poisoning, though his limp was more pronounced now. "Will Bramble have to testify too?" Elliot smiled. "No, buddy. But the jury's seen the videos from the rescue. They know what he did for you." Back in the courtroom, Elliot took the stand. He described finding the blood under Hope's claws, the evidence in the trailer, and the night of the rescue. His medical testimony about Perry's injuries and signs of long-term abuse left several jurors wiping their eyes. "And in your professional opinion, Doctor?" "Harrow," Matthews asked, "what would have happened if Bramble hadn't found the kitten that night?" Elliot met Junior's eyes across the courtroom. "The trailer was collapsing. Perry would have died there, alone in the dark. Nobody would have known where to look." The trial lasted 3 weeks. When the verdict came down, guilty on all counts, a collective exhale seemed to sweep through Rustwood. Junior Foy was sentenced to life without parole, and investigations into the daycare abuse ring expanded to 3 neighboring counties. At Lenora's farmhouse, where Perry now lived with his foster parents, healing took root like the spring flowers in her garden. The elderly woman had insisted they move into her spare cottage, understanding how important it was for Perry to keep his connection with Hope and Bramble. "Some wounds need more than medicine," she told Elliot one evening, watching Perry throw a ball for Bramble in the yard. "They need love, time, and a safe place to grow strong again." Hope darted between Bramble's legs, chasing the ball herself. Perry's laugh, still rare but growing stronger, rang out across the pasture. "He's talking more in therapy," Perry's foster mother shared, joining them on the porch. "Dr. Chen says having the animals there makes all the difference. They went through it with him, you know? They understand in a way we can't." Elliot nodded, remembering the terrified boy from the hospital. Today, Perry wore a new locket, a gift from his foster parents. Inside were tiny pictures, Hope on one side, Bramble on the other. A reminder that he wasn't alone anymore. "The other families are healing too," Judith added, having stopped by with case updates. Junior's confession opened everything. People are finally getting the help they need, the justice they deserve. They watched as Perry settled in the grass, Hope in his lap, and Bramble at his side. The sun was setting over Lenora's farm, painting the sky in gentle oranges and pinks. Where there had been darkness, light was slowly returning. The boy who had survived the unthinkable was learning to smile again, surrounded by the unlikely heroes who had never stopped believing in him. Justice had been served in the courthouse, but the real victory was here. In every moment, Perry felt safe enough to laugh, to play, to trust, to heal. 6 weeks after the trial, the Sunday afternoon ritual at Lenora's farmhouse had become sacred. The mid-April sun warmed the wraparound porch where Elliot Harrow sat, watching Perry chase butterflies in the garden. The 8-year-old's laughter, once so rare, now came more easily. Bramble followed Perry with watchful eyes, his protective instincts undimmed despite the pronounced limp from the poisoning. The German Shepherd moved more slowly now, but his dedication never wavered. When Perry ventured too close to the property line, Bramble would ease himself up and follow, a faithful shadow in the spring light. Hope, the tiny grey kitten who had started it all, had grown sleek and healthy. She darted between Perry's feet, batting at dandelion seeds and tumbling through the grass. The torn ears had healed, leaving small notches that somehow made her even more endearing. Wherever Perry went, Hope was never far behind, as if their shared trauma had forged an unbreakable bond. "Amazing how far they've come," Lenora said, bringing out a tray of lemonade. Her silver braid caught the sunlight as she settled into her rocking chair. "All 3 of them." Elliot nodded, accepting a glass. His veterinary practice had returned to its quiet routine of vaccinations and checkups, but something fundamental had shifted. The weight of grief he'd carried since his wife's death felt lighter somehow. Helping Perry had awakened parts of himself he'd thought were lost forever. "Judith called this morning," Lenora continued, watching Perry gather wildflowers. 3 more families have come forward about the daycare. The investigation's expanding to Marshall County now. The mention of Judith Crane brought a smile to Elliot's face. The former detective had finally received the vindication she deserved. Her years of persistence had been proven right, and the police department was facing serious questions about their handling of the case. There was talk of her consulting on similar investigations in neighboring districts. Perry's foster parents, Tom and Sarah Mitchell, emerged from the cottage carrying a picnic basket. They'd transformed the guest house into a warm home, filling it with books and toys and photographs. Most importantly, they understood Perry's need to stay close to the animals who had saved him. "Look what I found," Perry called out, running toward the porch with a handful of purple coneflowers. Hope trotted at his heels, while Bramble maintained his vigilant watch from the shade of an oak tree. "Those are beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, arranging them in a mason jar. "Should we put them on the dining table?" Perry nodded, then paused, his expression growing serious. He moved closer to Elliot, speaking in the soft voice they'd all grown accustomed to. "He saved me, you know." Elliot felt his eyes misting over as he looked at Bramble, the aging canine hero who had refused to give up. "He did, didn't he?" "He saved all of us," Elliot added quietly, remembering those dark days when the case seemed hopeless. Bramble had shown them the way, step by determined step, until the truth could no longer be denied. Tom spread the picnic blanket on the grass, and Perry settled between his foster parents. Hope immediately claimed his lap, purring contentedly as Perry stroked her fur. Bramble positioned himself at the edge of the blanket, alert but relaxed, every inch the guardian he'd always been. Lenora disappeared inside and returned with a plate of her famous oatmeal cookies. "Can't have a proper Sunday picnic without these," she announced, making Perry's face light up. As they shared sandwiches and cookies in the warm afternoon, Elliot observed the scene with a full heart. Here was healing in its purest form, not just for Perry, but for everyone the case had touched. The darkness that had haunted Rustwood for so long was finally receding, replaced by something brighter and more hopeful. Perry laughed as Hope stole a piece of turkey from his sandwich, and the sound carried across the garden like music. Bramble's tail thumped against the blanket, his dark eyes soft with contentment. These quiet moments, Elliot realized, were as important as any testimony or evidence. They were proof that even after unimaginable trauma, love and trust could grow again. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across Lenora's garden as Perry leaned back against Bramble's solid presence, hope curled in his arms. The boy who had endured so much was finding his way back to joy, surrounded by the unlikely family that fate had brought together. In that peaceful moment, watching Perry safe and loved between his two faithful protectors, Elliot understood that some miracles came on 4 legs, wrapped in fur, carrying hope in their hearts when humans had almost lost theirs. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.